Thank you for joining us for the Miami Valley Salute to Veterans. I am Cindy LaPointe-Dafler, volunteer host for Miami Valley Communications Council. My husband was killed in Vietnam in 1969 and was one of only 3 conscientious objectors ever awarded the Medal of Honor. Why am I host for this? I love being around our veterans and talking with them, hearing their stories and their thoughts. If my husband had survived the war, he would have been a veteran too, so it's my way of honoring his legacy. We hope that hearing these memories from the veterans of our community will help us all better understand the dedication of those who served. Today we're talking with John Smilek of Beaver Creek, a U.S. Air Force veteran who served from 1976 to 2000. He will tell us the story of his time in the military. Thank you for being here with us, John.
Thank you for having me.
When you went into the military, you enlisted, and why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, technically I didn't enlist. Actually, I'm an officer, so I came in under commission. And so that's the first thing our viewers may need a little difference than enlisted people enlist, and officers go through a commissioning, and you are commissioned as an officer. So I came in as a commissioned officer.
Can you explain that?
Yes, sir. There's different ways to come in on active duty, either through the academies, through Reserve Officer Training School, or ROTC, and then also there's also some direct commissioning, and sometimes even enlisted people go through OTS, Officer Training School. That's what they call it in the Air Force. I think it's slightly different in the other services. But yes, when you get a commission, obviously you have to come in and complete primarily these days a bachelor's degree, and then from there you can be and other requirements, and then you're commissioned as an officer. It's just a technicality of a word, so it's different.
You started college after high school?
Yes,
first.
I did. Right, and in fact, it's a good lead-in. I, like a lot of veterans, I didn't come from much of a family or anything else, financially or anything else, but I wanted to go to college, and I did, and I was working my way through. I had no support anyway, and after 4 years, I said, this is not working too well, and Vietnam was just about over when your husband was, and I was in that era, but I went to the ROTC on campus after 4 years, and so it took me 6 years to get through college, but I don't think I would have made it unless right away the Air Force and the little bit of money I got paid for my rent and a couple other things, and that helped me finish my last 2 years of college and graduate and get a commission to come on active duty in 1976.
So you got a degree of some sort?
Yes, I got I started out, I was just trying to get an associate degree, and then realized I wanted a bachelor's degree, so I got an associate degree and then industrial technology, and then a bachelor's degree in technical education, teaching adults whatever topic it might be.
Well, that must have been impressive for the Air Force. They like that.
Yes, they do.
So what was your military occupational specialty, MOS?
My MOS, actually, being in for a little over 24 years, I had a multiple, but the first one I had, and the primary one I had, is I was fortunate enough to, when I came in to ROTC, there was a change, and right after Vietnam, they were allowing students that had actually been even gone through a couple of years and even gotten scholarships to go through ROTC to avoid getting out of paying the debt, as we're talking about a lot of students these days, and they could get out if they wanted to. That broke open some other positions, including a navigator billet. So I came in. I was originally going to be a missile launch officer and come in for 4 years. And then the first quick story is I'm still a cadet, and they found out that I was the only cadet left in the ROTC detachment from my year group that had qualified both for the pilot and the navigator exams. I'd passed them, and then but I have 220 vision, and I barely passed the navigator exam and had no shot at a pilot, but I did pass because I was already over 21, 4th year of school. And so I was actually 22, and I came in as a navigator. So I went through navigation school in 76 and part of 77.
Okay. Now, for basic training, did you do that before when you were in ROTC?
Right. It's, again, a slightly different term. Instead of basic training, I can't even quite remember the name. I know it's not basic training. I don't want any of the proud enlisted people to say, oh, no, they just, they had a nice little charm school. But I did go through 6 weeks of, I forget the name of it, but yes, I went through it right as I came, for me, for a commissioner, most people going through ROTC do it between their sophomore and junior year or second and third year in college. They go, and since I didn't do the first 2 years, I went for 6 weeks in the summer of 1974 to Rickenbacker Air Force Base, and got up at 5:30 in the morning and got dressed and fixed the bed and everything else, and then went to out for physical training and running, and then marched to breakfast, and then I came back and cleaned up the room and went and so not near what the enlisted people have to go through. So I'm not going to say I did that, but it wasn't a lot of fun either. It was pretty intense for 6 weeks.
Well, yeah, you're away from your home and your family. Was that different for you? Had you traveled?
I had not. In fact, it was, if I can tie in, that my wife now was my girlfriend, and we met at college, and she was a nursing student. The quick story is, when she found out I had been gone for 6 weeks in the summer, she was between her junior and senior year in college, and you could do nursing in residence, like you had to do either through the summer between your junior and senior year or your last quarter before you graduate. She goes, well, my boyfriend's gone for 6 weeks in the summer of 1974, so she went through her 10 weeks of in residence. So really it worked out very well.
That did work out. That's nice. Okay. And so you took advanced training for your MOS where?
Yes, and Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento. It's no longer a base there, but it was really an impressive place. So it was, again, by then I'm married to Jill, and so we'd been married about 15 months when I came on active duty. So she spent the whole 24 years with me, and was just amazing. And so it was our adventure. We're young, married for a little over a year, and driving all the way out to Mather from Ohio to California. We're both from Ohio, like I say, back here in Ohio again, and went out there for about 9 months it takes to go through navigation school. And then after that, then you go through another advanced training for what primary aircraft you're going to be as a navigator. In my case, it was a KC-135 in the Strategic Air Command. When you see the footage of air refueling, that's what I did. So I was a navigator in the air refueling, and also that was at the time in the 70s. You were then in the Strategic Air Command. So that's the command I was in, and my primary job was, I started as a navigator, and then I became a senior navigator and a master navigator before I retired many years later.
So what was your first assignment? Where was it?
Well, that was the one assignment, and there's a lot of things in the military where we go where the military needs us, and I did that once. And actually twice. I went to, there was only one nav school. It was at Mather Air Force Base. That was great. And then they sent me to Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma, which is not where I wanted to go. I was okay with 135s, but it was really out in the boonies. But my wife liked it. She's a small town girl, and she liked it there. But I was assigned there again in the a squadron, the 11th Air Refueling Squadron, who had just come back from Vietnam. Actually, they were one of the tankers units that were out in Vietnam, and a lot of the guys I first got there when I was a young second lieutenant, some of the captains and stuff had even been in Vietnam with the 135s. But we did not have B-52s where we were, which I think was a little easier, so we weren't quite as classified and secret area, but we definitely had secrets. We were part of the emergency war orders for the Cold War to go and fly and nuclear, for the bombers, refuel them to get their mission to wherever they needed to go if the big war, the nuclear war, ever broke out. So we were sitting on alert. When I got there, I was there actually a little over 5 years, and about the first 4.5, I became the senior navigator. But before I left, but before that, sitting on alert 1 week out of 3, and all those movies you see of the back then, mostly back in the 70s and into the late 70s, men and women sitting on alert for 24/7 for 7 days in a row, and then you'd be off for 14 days, of which then you got your flying in, and then you sat on alert again for rotation after rotation. There were times you went on military, TDY, temporary duty, and traveling to other places, but that was my main job, is to sit on alert, waiting, ready for the big war.
Wow. What was that like? I mean...
Yeah, that was, I was a different 2 lifetimes ago, I think, and I'd just be interested how kids this day would deal with that. But you sat there, you went out, and we know in the news right now all about the classified and some of the mishandling of classified by our government officials, and I'm not going to pick a party. I'm just saying government officials. It really bothers me beyond belief, because I will say, when I was on alert, as a navigator, you're also in charge of the secrets. So the top secret war orders of where we were going to go and everything, I had to pick them up from a secure skiff, they call it. That's a building or at least a facility within a building where they keep the classified under lock and key, multiple layers. I carried it out to the airplane, locked it up. And I was going to say, I would like to say too, is I sat on alert. You got there on a Wednesday in the morning. Every time the other crews, a week later, it was like Wednesday afternoon. So you sat out there, you ate out there, you slept out there. I always kiddingly say if I ever did anything wrong and had to go to prison, I have 16 months of time in a building surrounded by barbed wire, dogs, and men in M16s walking around. So yeah, I sat there 1 week out of 3 doing that. And when I was there, the 3 main things I had my dog tags, and then you couldn't fly. I'm married and have a ring, and you're not allowed to wear rings or jewelry while you're flying because you could catch it on things. They could either catch and flip a switch the wrong way, or you could, in an emergency, you could have your finger literally broken or taken off if you did. So on the dog tags, I had my dog tags itself, my wedding ring, and the key to the secrets. And they were all right here, shower, shape, whatever you were doing for 7 days, it was right here and protected it. And I'll just say for all us veterans that those of us that had to deal with classified levels, and I did at some of the highest levels, it's for our nation's security. So being a veteran, I did it for our nation, but I kept those secrets secret because it's what's most important for our nation as well. I know it's kind of a public speech right there, but I think I'm very, I believe in that dearly. That's what I was doing for my life.
Yep. Where did you go next?
Okay. Actually, I was in the test wing and made captain and was there for a few years. And then I was very fortunate that I found out about a test wing, the 4950th test wing, the one and only, we call them heavy, meaning large aircraft test wing in the entire Air Force at the time, active duty. And it was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which we are just a few miles from right now. So in 1983, I transferred out, and I actually went up there. And normally in the military, as we're saying, they tell you where you're going to go to your next assignment and where you're going to do. This is my first step now to say, no, I'm going to pick where I want to go if I can. And I was very fortunate. I had to go up and actually interview and turn in a resume, which normally you don't have to do. Honestly, they call it MPC, Manning Personnel Center in the Air Force. And they tell you, now your assignment is here. If you want it, fine. If not, out you go. But I got to the test wing and flew some of the most, and navigated and some of the most interesting and kind of scary but exciting test and research aircraft. And I flew all around the world and different things. Flew against the space shuttle multiple times. I've landed on the space shuttle runway and other missions where I've been doing test and research. And that's what I did for my second flying tour.
Any details?
The interesting thing in the test wing, it doesn't exist anymore. We actually went out of business. And that is from the late 70s till about 1992, 93, the test wing existed. And one of our main jobs, I was in they had 6 aircraft. Actually, then I gained a couple more that were the 135 airframe, which is the same KC-135A is what I flew as a navigator. And these were NC-135s. And in our main book, it's called -1 is our literally Bible about how the aircraft works. They had all the aircraft listed, and they had WCs for weather and RCs reconnaissance. I never knew what NC stood for, and NC stands for test and research aircraft. And we had an aircraft that had multiple aircraft that used to be called Apollo Range Instrumentation Aircraft. So you and I are about the same age, and back when we were probably watching the Apollo missions, I remember on the black and white TV, there's these big circles of, this is how we're following this airplane. And I'm sorry, not the airplane. The airplane is NASA's following the astronauts as they're going around the Earth. And I go, how in the heck? They're out in the middle of the ocean. Wow, what's tracking them? What was these Arias? Apollo Range Instrumentation Aircraft, also 135 airframes. They have a 7-foot radar dome in the front of them for telemetry gathering, and they'd have a signal that could get on the space on the Apollo missions, and they could track them until they left orbit and headed to the moon. That's how they were tracking them. When the Apollo missions ended in the early 70s, then they moved them from Florida up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and changed their name from Apollo Range to Advanced Range Instrumentation Aircraft. And for the late 70s to early 90s, did a lot of missions where we were tracking with shuttle or NASA or other cruise missiles, that kind of thing, where with our radar we'd be up high and be tracking where the vehicles were going. And in space, we'd also track then the shuttle and other rockets that would fly off. The nose of the airplane would be out somewhere around the equator, because they seem to be on an equator. Most of these fly around the equator, have a sine wave up and down the equator. We would track them until NASA could actually lock on them and make sure they had them for sure. We were their safety net from takeoff till NASA got them up in space and could lock on them. So again, flew against multiple missions with the shuttles, and even when the Challenger blew up, I was on that mission.
Oh God.
Yeah, we were. So this is another part of being in the military. It was tough. We were in Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, and got a knock on the door, and I said, "I'm on crew rest. What are you waking me up for?" And the guy said, "They blew it up." And I'll never forget. I go, "They blew what up?" They said, "They blew up the Challenger." So we had a long 2-day drive, flight back home, kind of somber. So the shuttle did a lot of deployment of satellites, and there was a TDRS satellite, is what they called it at the time, that we were going to actually track after it left the shuttle bay. And obviously that didn't happen. But I also flew on multiple other missions where I either followed the rockets that came off the shuttles they were going off and got that information right back to NASA, or we flew other times where they were deploying probes out to other planets and that kind of thing that they were deploying up in space, so we could actually follow and could actually see the shuttle sometimes in space, or the fire of the rocket shooting it away. So more time we need, but I've had some incredible missions flying in the Air Force, and there's just no other way. There's handfuls of people that have been able to do what I did. So I've been very, very, very blessed.
If you're just joining us, this is Miami Valley Salute to Veterans podcast from the Miami Valley Communications Council. I'm your host, Cindy LaPointe-Dafler. Today we're talking with John Smilek. Does any particular officer, instructor, anyone in particular stand out to you during your service?
That's a good question. I would say that no one particular one did, but I do know that I was fortunate enough to be around some incredible people, both enlisted and officers and civilians as well. I want to bring up a fact too, that the Department of Defense, and we are the veterans, and we're the ones that technically have to bear arms and that kind of thing. But also military and civilians have been briefed up to 4-star generals before on different things. I had a headquarters job. Actually, when I was done flying, I went to a headquarters job. I got selected for a school. It's called Air Command and Staff College. It's in school for medium level majors in the Air Force. And I went through that and then came back as a major and flew again the test wing. And I want to say one thing of all things, a name that a lot of people that are familiar with the military know about, Jimmy Doolittle and his Raiders in World War II. Mm-hmm. Well, his grandson, Jimmy Doolittle III, did me a big favor. I actually talked to him when he got assigned as one of the top 3 officers in the 49th 50th Test Wing in between tours when we were both at a headquarters job. And he was a lieutenant colonel, about ready to make colonel, and I was a major, and we got to know each other fairly well. And this is how things work sometimes when you get close bonds in the military. I went to school, and they were going to send me back to the Strategic Air Command, which I did not want to go back to. I loved being in the test and research and acquisition world, and I got told that's probably where I was going to go, and I gave then Colonel Doolittle, he was deputy for operations, number 3 man in the test wing, and said, they want to send me back to SAC. And he goes, "They're not sending you back to SAC. Give me, this is Monday, give me till Friday and call this lieutenant colonel, and we'll have you back here in the test wing." And sure enough, I called 4 days later, and I got to go back to the test wings for a second tour. So it's funny to drop the name Jimmy Doolittle III. He was a test pilot. He actually had astronaut wings. He had flown so far in a fighter so high into space that he got astronaut wings. So an incredible man. And the good story is he didn't want to go to the test wing. I said, it's an amazing place. I know it's not fighters, but you'll love it. He did love it. And he did me a big favor by getting me back to the test wing and getting to fly some more missions to finish up my flying time in that part of my Air Force.
Oh my
time.
gosh.
Yeah.
Well, did you have this is back at Wright Pat?
It is right back. I went from Wright Pat to Andrews Air Force Base in D.C. at a headquarters, Systems Command headquarters. Went to school for a year and came back in 1990 and then flew in the test wing again. But very fortunate. I had been much time in the Cold War, as I said, in the Strategic Air Command for 5 or 6 years, counting training, about 6 years of my first quarter of my flying career, then the test wing, and got back in 90, and then Desert Storm hit in 1991. Actually flown against the space shuttle, actually in the Indian Ocean, and we landed in Mombasa, Africa, on my 40th birthday. And I was flying, and we had this emergency evacuate the aircraft signal from our crew chief as we're landing. And we're like, it's been like a 12-hour, we've been flying for 9 hours. We've been out here for 11 hours. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't be messing with us. So we're in the Mombasa airport. It's just in very eastern Africa on the Indian Ocean. After we landed, after we got our mission completed with this shuttle, and what happened is he was given emergency orders. As a navigator, my job is the crew chute is right behind my chair for my my special, not orders, but my where you have to have things you have to know by heart, and mine is how to spin around, open this lever that drops the door open, and I pull another lever or handle up that moves a gate out of the way, and the crew chief the flying guy that was in our plane with us dropped the ladder down, and I'm in the way, so I had slammed this thing down to lock the ladder, and I'm the first of what was about 15, 18 people on the airplane down the chute, and I go splash. I go, splash.
Water?
No, we busted our main fuel tank. I'm standing in a couple inches of JP4
oh my God.
jet fuel while the engines are going and they're flipping switches. And I said I said a very nasty word and screamed up there, get out of here, we're going to blow up. And then the procedure is to run to the nose of the airplane as far away as you can. So we all got out of there. And that's just some of the crazy war, and it's one of my, all of us have war stories. That's mine, and one of mine. And so we got out and lived through that. And then, what happened is then we had to stay there in Africa for an extra few weeks because they pretty much decided the airplane was still flight worthy. But this kind of scared me a little bit. I had to send a letter to the wife. Hope I was going to make it through, but they said that we brought 20-some people on the airplane back, and they said all those people except for the 2 pilots, the navigator, and the crew chief in there, you're all going to get another airplane. This airplane's safe, but we're taking everybody else off and putting them on another C-141 and taking them home, and you're going to hop your way multiple times because you don't have any fuel tanks in the middle, and hopefully, you'll get home okay. So we brought that airplane back to Wright Pat over a 2 or 3 day hopping through Africa and Ascension Island, and out in the Atlantic, and then in again. And the reason I tell that story is, though, I got to know a navigator on the C-141 cruise, and I say, hey, if you ever need a nav on the 141, I'd love to cross-train a little bit. And he goes, well, there's only like one that does it, but we'll see. Not 3 months later, Desert Storm happens, actually Desert Shield and then Desert Storm. And then we had two, in the test wing, we had 2 old A-model 141 test wing aircraft. And they still needed navigators and that kind of thing. And when the Military Airlift Command, which was in existence back in 1991, we needed everything we can to get cargo into the war. So they got 2 of our test aircraft, and they took the test stuff out of it, and we just start hauling trash, as we call it. So I got to flying the Desert Storm and missions into Desert Storm, and was on Desert Storm orders for six months of crazy hard flying. 11% of my entire flying was this 6-month period. Plus I had to stay qualified in the other airplane, which was even harder to do both, but we did it. And so it was really hard flying and that kind of thing. And so I've been blessed to be both I've experienced the Cold War and the hot wars as well. And so just a weird job. And I went to different places like that. Finally, I know it's taken a little longer, but with 24 years, then when I also realized that in all this flying I was doing in the test wing test as part of this acquisition, I ended up getting in the acquisition world, and then that was my second big job in the Air Force. And my third was when I got in the acquisition world, I got into international part of Department of Defense. So I did all kinds of international work as well. And that's what I finished my career up. I was mostly doing, I was the chief of the International Arms Cooperation Programs when we do cooperation with other countries, and did a lot of memorandums of understanding and information exchange agreements with the Department of Defense and other countries. And so got to travel around and see and work with the Department of Defense or ministers of defense in many other countries.
Oh my gosh.
Busy 24 years.
Yes. Any humorous or unusual events?
Oh, that's now. I wasn't expecting that question. I'm trying. You're always pranking each other a little bit in the military, that kind of thing. And I will say that the one of the things too that was interesting, it wasn't as much humorous, but it was seeing how well some of the young women that came on in active duty enlisted in officers, and how honestly some of them were not treated that well back in the 70s. And I'm not going to say exactly what happened, but one young lady was a first lieutenant, came in when we were still in the Strategic Air Command, and out there on alert, there was crews of 4 times 6. There's 24 of us out there for a week, and came out there, and some of them did not treat her very well. But she was the daughter of a full colonel, and she'd been around the military all the time. I'm not going to say some of the things she said, but let's just say the young lady could take care of herself and gave it back harder than she got it from these. So I always found that her humor of taking it back with being just, she had a quick wit, and she would just cut some of these jerks back down to size, and I loved it.
That's great.
So that's thumbs up to the women in the military, and I'm glad that they're even more of an integral part of us now.
So you got out in 2000. Then what happened?
Well, actually, I stayed in. What they call this, 2000, I had a little over 24 years on active duty, and there's a slang for this called double dipping. And for those of you in the military, that means that I came in again as an officer, and I was fortunate enough not just to be a contractor. I wasn't a contractor. I came in as a GS, so I got hired as a civilian, and I went to work as a professor in a schoolhouse. Started as an instructor, but worked up to professor level. It's called DISAM, Defense Institute of Security Assistance Management. And all the Ukraine, all the war that's going on right now, as we're speaking like this, that's all security assistance and security cooperation. When you hear the word security assistance, it goes back to World War II. After the war, the U.S. still had an amazing military operation of building weapons and that kind of thing. And not only did the U.S. government help these countries, that some of them were our enemies, get themselves back on the feet, but those that were our friends and allies as well. That was called security assistance to help build them. They didn't have any money, so we assisted them by funding them. It started really with the British to stop them when the Germans were coming through. And then it goes on to this day, and security cooperation is when other countries can pay for it, which is primarily the way, but like the war in Ukraine right now, everything you're hearing about, the billions of dollars are going there. What I did for another 15 years, so 8 months shy of 40 years working for the Department of Defense, I did, was also a tech transfer, which is all back of technology transfers and what we will and will not transfer, and classified. That was actually, I literally could say, I didn't write the book, but I wrote the chapter repeatedly for 15 years in our Green Book, which is our textbook for everybody who came through our college accredited school that we taught here on base. And it was for, even though it was at Wright Pat, it was for all the services, including Coast Guard, State Department, Commerce Department. People would come in as well. And then we go to other countries, usually for a couple weeks at a time, and work with them to teach them how to buy from us. And I have to say, you're talking to me as a veteran, but number one, I've already brought up my wife went through all this, and my kids. Amazing that they put 24 years and did so well. And all the young ladies that came in, the last thing I like to say too is the civilians too, because it's kind of strange. I spent more time in war zones as a military person in the war zone as a civilian than I did in the military. I was a veteran of foreign wars during Desert Storm for a few months and some of the landings and having to go into the war zone, but I also was in almost every country in the Middle East, including Afghanistan, for trips, and wearing body armor and that kind of thing, because we went into the Afghan and Iraq and Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, all the countries, the UAE, been to all those countries and others. And there are civilians too that even are not veterans, as in holding and carrying arms. It actually kind of bothered me, because I was over there, and it was at least one time we were we had to run back into the main part of it. We were off base teaching the Afghans how to acquire items from us for their military, and there was a bomb that went off and killed 11 people, 10 car bomb, and the building was shaking. And it's kind of weird when you hear everybody put the click of they don't keep the ammunition in the weapons, so the click is they put the rounds in. Mm-hmm. I go, oh, this isn't good. So we're running back in and that kind of thing, and we're under we didn't know if we were going to be under fire or anything like that. But again, as a civilian, also there's civilians out there. Actually, all this I ended up getting. This is very rare, but the Citizenship War on Terrorism medal for the civilians. It's like a fraction of 1%, and I'm proud of that. But my point is, there aren't that many, but there's some civilians that have been in danger's way as well, because I've been right next to them as a civilian, and some that were full-time civilians that sometimes have to go, and you can't bear arms, which again was bothering me. I said, give me a weapon too. I mean, nope, you're a civilian, not allowed. You can't be non-combative. So that's another thing for people to understand. That's kind of the difference. So the civilians can be in some danger zones that work for the military, but they cannot bear arms, and that's part of the agreements of war. So wow. Just another interesting thing that maybe a lot of people don't know, but I lived it. So it's
might have been frustrating.
Yes, it was. It was sitting there as everybody else got a weapon, and we knew something bad had happened, and they were coming out with an armored vehicle. Once we were the last people to go through the entrance into the compound again, and we were running back, and they got back to the building where we were, and they were all in their gear and stuff, and they were working out to the armored vehicle to come hopefully get us. And we made it back just in time, and before they closed the gates down, that kind of thing. So wow. Interesting life,
to say the least. So are you done with the civilian? I mean,
yes, I retired, and I did that for 15 years, but then I started a company with a couple other gentlemen that did the security assistance and security cooperation. We do that between countries and our U.S. and all different parts of the U.S. government, but there's companies out there, some large and small, that do a lot of work with the military, and it's a very complicated procedure to sell military items to other countries. And we have a small company that does that, and we have contracts with some of the military companies now, companies that do this to help them understand there are things that can be sold to certain countries and others that can't. Every country's different. And they go in there and they think they might be able to sell, but what happened is the technology transfer it's actually State Department's job to make the decision whether a country's going to get the military items. All this going on right now with Ukraine and other places in the U.S., that's not the U.S. Department of Defense is making that decision. That's State Department.
I see.
Now we are then, when the State Department says thumbs up or thumbs down, if they say thumbs up, then we in the military, I'm still feel like I'm because I'm working with the military, then the military puts together what they call a letter of offer and accept. It's kind of contract between us and other countries. And that's how that contract says who, what, when, how much money, the procedure, what time frame, what technology has to be transferred, what has to be secured, and all that kind of things, all very complicated. And so we are helping other companies that can help, hopefully they know, oh, the other country wants this, but that's not what they can't have that right now, because that's at a level that the State Department says we don't want to transfer that to another country. That's happening right now with Ukraine again, with some of the weapons they've wanted that's taken so long. That State Department making that final decision to, the President and the State Department, not DOD. The Department of Defense is just telling the State Department what can and cannot happen here. They have a seat at the table, but the final decisions in the State Department, not DOD. And in fact, I'm wearing, can't even see it here, but I'm wearing a State Department. This is actually Kuwait, one of the countries I went to, because we in the DOD work when it comes to foreign countries. It's usually through state, and we're just one of the vehicles that State Department has to decide what we're going to do as well. Oh, wow. So, and another thing with being the Department of Defense, you're not just in one part of the government, you're working with other parts of the government and State Department specifically, even when it comes to selling all these munitions overseas.
And they all have to be happy.
Yeah. and most people aren't.
No. And it's difficult to work with the government like that.
It is.
At any time they cut you off.
Yes, and it's even happened to me as a contractor. Now, I've lived both. I've been on active duty, civilian, and contractor. I've got all three covered. So, yes.
You've seen it all.
I've seen it all. I finally retired at 70 a couple of years ago from the company as well. So, still own a little bit of it, but finally said enough.
So you're really retired now?
Well, actually, I retired. I still had to work with the company a little bit. I had a couple things go wrong. Again, that's another story, but they needed me. They're doing the security measures for the facility security and all that kind of thing. So finally, about 3 months ago at almost 72, I finally am officially retired. I said, enough. So I said, I kiddingly told everybody for a while, I said, I worked from 17 to 71. I switched the numbers. That's long enough. So I'm retired now finally, but only for a matter of a few months.
Okay. Okay. Do you attend military reunions? Are you a member of a veteran organization?
I am not. I could be, but I'm not. I honestly, I don't do much of that. I've been, I still go on the base and do things like that. And I have friends I have specific friends that I go out and have dinner with that are military. So and we kiddingly, the Army, Navy, Air Force is always giving each other grief. So I'm not a veteran. I am a veteran of foreign wars. I could be in the VFW and that kind of thing, but I just haven't done too much, just very specific. But on the other hand, I'm very involved with the Boy Scouts. Not that that's military, but I just worked at a jamboree, and there was another retired 24-year naval officer, same rank as I am, a commander, which is the same as Lieutenant Colonel retired. And all we did for the first week at jamboree is just poke at each other about, oh yeah. I'm out, the Navy guy said, oh, you're in the Air Force. Do you know what a tent is? This is, or the Army's like, this is a tent. This isn't a nice hotel like you used to have. I go, yeah, I know how to put a tent up, do you know how to, and then I would give him some grief about something else. His tent wasn't going up right. Oh, if you got the mental capability to put a tent up there, Commander, and we, you just go back and forth. And same thing with, I'm having lunch tomorrow with an Army friend of mine from the time when we were both professors there, and yeah, we tell war stories and how we're going to save the world every week when we have lunch. So,
oh, that's wonderful.
I pick not any organizations, but some good friends from the military, of course. And my wife's a military wife, and so she's got plenty of other wives that have got husbands in the military. So it's a lot of one-on-one instead of being an organization.
That's okay. Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered?
We've covered a lot. I know I think I covered the main things is that, but I'd like to say over again that my wife came in, and when you talk to veterans, it's a spouse, not just wife, of course, especially These days. But my spouse was amazing when I'd be gone for months at a time and come back. And back in the day, back in the 70s, there was no phone or anything. There were times I wrote letters, and I stopped writing letters halfway through the deployment because I'd be gone for 45 days. Well, it took 15, 20 days for the letters to get back. So you just didn't talk or know each other for weeks. And I'd come back from either weeks or months gone, and it was like, hello, dear, and the kids give me a hug, and she goes, okay, the trash is ready to take out. You know what I'm saying? It's like
you never left.
Never left. And just it makes it so much easier for us veterans when the spouses are so supportive, and she was, and almost all of them are, and God bless them for all they put up with us, with our jobs where sometimes you're just called away at an instant's notice and gone for a long time and come back to that. And again, so I just think the whole universe, the veterans' spouses and their children, women and men in the veteran. I talked about that, and the military people and the civilians that work in the military people. It really takes a community like that for it all to run. And I want to make sure that they're all representative, because they're all. I'm the veteran, but they all are so supportive of the veterans that we all appreciate them.
What advice would you have for a young person coming up?
I actually would absolutely. These times, there's different things in your life. Yeah, it's tough to get an education, and I feel for these people that have a lot of debt and that kind of thing. But if you don't want some of the debt, you can get into the reserve or guard, or even come on active duty. That's what I did. So for me, I'd say that the military is a great place to maybe get a couple more years to grow before you maybe go to college, or if you go to college and want to get out and start something. Military is for young people. I realized when I retired 1 week before I turned 49 that I was 99% of the people on active duty were younger than I am when I retired. So my point is the young people's thing, and I would say at least think about it. It's a great way to serve your country. You learn so much more. It broadens your horizons. And for those of you that are wondering, well, I don't know how I'm going to pay for school, the GI Bill goes a long way. It took care of my master's. I didn't pay anything for my master's degree. So if you don't have to come in for 24 like I did, or 20 to retire. You can come in for a few years, and it'll make you a more rounded person for many of you, and also give you great insight, and it's also a very positive thing on your resume, and it can also help you financially with the scholarship. So there's a lot of upside to coming in the military for a while. It is not for everyone, and there's rules to follow and that kind of thing, but you gain so much for what you give, and also you've helped your country, and I can't think of a better thing to do.
Yes, you're right. What would you like people to know or remember about your story?
That I came in because I came into the military, loving our nation, but I learned in the military how so much, again, met so many people, and my stories and everything I've gotten to do, I couldn't have done. Been to 6 continents at least 3 times. Every continent I've been to Antarctica. I've been to 45 countries. Been through the parts of the White House nobody sees. Done some things and flying missions and that kind of things that you can't do in the civilian world. So I'd say what I've learned mostly is if I had to do over again, I'd absolutely come in the military no matter what, get an experience like this, and it makes you understand what it's like and how the whole government works and how important it is. And it also makes you feel really great when you're saluting that flag, because it's, you helped keep America strong. And I don't know, other than family, that's key for me, and I think it would be key to anybody else that came on active duty.
Thank you so much, John.